Good morning, my name is Dave Stone, and this is my interview with Captain Jonathan Moore for Communications and Conflict Management 6022. This is my interviewee, Mr. Jonathan Moore. He's the Ops Manager for Nakilat Shipping. He's worked with Shell for most of his life in Nigeria, Russia, the UK, and currently working in Doha in Qatar. He has 9 superintendents under him, and I'd say he affects probably 30 or 40 people in the building as well. We run a fleet of 18 LNG carriers, which constitutes about 900 staff. And also we have joint ventures with 7 other different companies, and they have about 45 LNG carriers, again, which he is responsible for. My video is almost 2 hours long, so what I've done is I've broken it down to overview and key points. And one of the key points that John made came out in question 5. And it says, have you ever been in a situation where you've decided it's not worth the fight and surrender your opinion to avoid conflict? And I believe this is where you're making a decision where, win-lose situations. So it's a good little criteria that I thought he came up with. If you want to get the full interview section, you can go to 8 minutes and 15 seconds in the audio file and listen to John's full talk about it. And so when he's mentoring his superintendents, he goes in, do you need to win every fight? That's the question you should be asking. And if you are that person who needs to win every fight, will that make you be perceived as a troublemaker? If you shout all the time, eventually no one will hear you anymore. Okay, so you have to pick your battles, draw the line in the sand. So his rule of thumb for drawing the line in the sand is, number 1, can you influence the outcome? You might not like the decision, but you may not be able to influence that decision in the way you want, and you have to balance that out. And number 1, is that decision important? Is it a safety-related issue? Are people's lives affected? If it's money or scheduling or something like that, maybe not as important. Okay, so John's rule of thumb is if he can influence it and it's important, then he goes for it. So John talks about having a filter when you're making your decision process. Is it important? Can you influence it? But also things to consider. When you're making a decision is an opinion. It's a perspective. And from chapter 12, we talk about ethical decisions and decision-making processes. And here's a good point where he brings up your decision, your perspective of that is brought on by your upbringing, your culture, your understanding of the topic, okay? That is what brings you to make a decision if it's right or wrong in your opinion. And usually that is only determined if it's right or wrong by hindsight, okay? You take your decision, with all the facts you have, you make a decision, and you execute it, and only when you look back on it after time, you can decide that was a proper decision or the best for the situation. So, your ethics and all that, your hindsight, your upbringing, your culture, that's what brings into an effect. And like I said, it is a perspective, not necessarily right or wrong. Another great point from John came in question 6, and the question was, what do you believe are the key factors which lead to conflict within the workplace? And I thought this was a great example from chapter 9, when we talked about functional conflict, task, relationship, and process conflict. And if you want John's full answer to that, it comes, go to 10 minutes and 36 second mark to hear his full speech on it. And his first point was competence. Okay, and if you are the most technically competent or most experienced or most knowledgeable person in the room, and you use that competence to put other people down or beat it over people's heads that they're not as smart or not as clever, it is not a competition. Sure, we talk about our appraisals at the end of the year and performance-based and stuff like that, but it's not a competition, And we find that the more technically competent person, John wants to pull that person aside and say, look, we understand that you're most technically competent, but no need to beat that over someone's head, So be aware of that. Be the bigger person, and teach and coach and try to sway people's opinions. You can be honest, but you don't need to be brutally honest. Okay, being brutally honest can affect people as well. Okay, John used the analogy of a football player or soccer player. If you have a star player and he's running around and doing it all himself, and the team hates him, then they're going to lose. Okay, but if you have a star player that brings other people and encourages other people and brings them into the game, you as a team win, then everyone wins, okay? And compromise, and one of the last points here, compromise is not a bad word, okay? Figure out, as a filter, find out what's important to you. Is it important? Do you have influence over it? Okay. Ethically, don't compromise on your ethics and things like this. But if it's a budget or something that's nothing to you, let it go. Life is short. Be the bigger person. Let other people contribute. Let other people win one of their points every now and then to make the team improve. So in question 7, how does your company generally resolve conflict? John uses the office atmosphere as his example. If you want to hear the conversation, 13 minutes and 53 seconds is the start point. And he says when these guys have a blow up, they want to go to the formal process. Oh, I've been wronged. Go down to HR and put in a formal grievance and stuff like that. And John says, if we do that, then really I have lost as a manager. I haven't caught it early enough. And he says, don't get me wrong. If it is something, there's a bullying or there's something really, really wrong that needs to be corrected, then sure, we need to go through the process of going to HR. Okay, but there's a lot of gray area he talked about. He used this word, sense of injustice or being wronged. And that really goes to chapter 9, again, talking about conflict and perceived inequities on page 320, I do believe it was, talking about misunderstandings and resolving personal conflict. So for him, resolving personal conflict, usually he says it starts out with just a small misunderstanding. It could have been a couple of days ago, weeks ago, whatever it is. And then it became more polarizing to the point where they blow up and it escalates. And, they're coming to his, knocking on his door to solve this problem. Okay. And that's why he says early intervention is key. All right. So that small misunderstanding, the lack of communication, some sense of injustice or perceived inequity, and like I said, it escalates to the point where it blows up, and so early intervention for that is key. I combined questions 8 and 9 together. I couldn't really find too much of a reference in the book to explain these, but I thought they were worth mentioning because we have a lot of young people in our class who will be managers, one day maybe, and I thought this was a good little piece of advice. So John thinks that he's worried about blind spots, as in people come to him in his office, and those people come to him all the time. He finds he's very approachable and stuff like that. And he's not worried about those people because if they do have a problem, he knows they will come to him. It's the people who are not coming to him. Those are the people he's worried about, that they might have a problem that's become a blind spot to him. He doesn't see it, and then bam, it catches him out. Okay, so he's more concerned about the people who do not come to him. Number one, also, is another point he wants to point out. He doesn't want to be the first, knock on the door, first person to be called for solving a problem. He said if that happened, the minutia of all the day-to-day problems would come to his office, and he needs to have a filter. He would much prefer that those people, if they had a problem, they would go to see, another coworker, discuss how they're going to do it, and hopefully solve it on their own. But if it does escalate, then of course come to him. So he'd rather be the second or third person they think of when they go to solve a problem, and stuff like that. So he said there has to be a firewall. Obviously the door has to be open so people can approach, but he doesn't want to be that approachable that it starts to swamp. He gets swamped with all these small, minute problems, and he just can't get it all done. So we want to be able to resolve it, hopefully at levels below him, and then when it gets to him, then he can solve it and fix it. Okay. So question 10 asks, how often do you meet with your team and call staff meetings? And same thing again, key points. If you want to go to 20 minutes and 2 seconds and 25, me and John went off on a little bit of a tangent there. But we wanted to talk about team meetings. So we have 2 team meetings a week. One is with his 9 superintendents, and that is very, very specific about what's happening in the fleet, any problems and so forth and so on. And the other one is our TOR meeting, our technical operational meeting. And that is where technical, operations, supply, everyone, legal comes in, and they discuss what is happening in the fleet on all aspects so that everyone is aware of what's happening. Okay. So those are the 2 formal meetings they have. As for meeting his team members, there's not a day goes by where he will not talk to at least every member of his team once, if not multiple times. Okay, and I said this is really good for specifically chapter 7 when we're talking about interacting. Interacting effectively, and the advantages of disadvantages of communication. So we do as much as possible face to face or verbally on the phone. Okay, in the office, face to face for sure, especially for bigger things. Because if you had to sit down and type it out, it would be one, it'd be too time consuming, and two, you wouldn't be able to convey your idea properly. Okay, so for bigger things or the detail that you need, we do that face to face. I hear it many times. The captain will say, "Oh, I'm not going to respond to that email," and if it's important, they will call. Okay, and that is kind of a criteria. So email is only for technical stuff. Just data collecting and send that off, ETAs, and just notifying people. But if you have a problem, we usually pick up a phone from the ship or in the office. They will come and speak to you face to face. So question 9 asks, what are some of the barriers you face with effective communication? How do you try to overcome them? And I'm going to try to apply this from a chapter 7 point of view, cultural barriers. Okay, and I know when you think of cultural barriers, you might think of a difference between nationalities or religions or whatever that is. But I'm going to approach it from a different discipline point of view. Okay, and the two disciplines I'm talking about is operations and technical. Operations, you also refer to as oil and water. So oil are the engineers, the technical section, right? They work in the engine room, and we call them oil because they're working down in the engine room with all the grease. And operations are the deck department, who are the navigators, the captains who run the ship, and stuff like that. And the two elements, the two disciplines, have been at odds with each other for hundreds of years. Okay, it's a thing. Okay, and it's a very different mindset of how they approach a problem. Technical are very very technically oriented, obviously, and operations see that more the bigger picture of commercial and all these things. Okay, so the organizational structure of our company, because of these two disciplines, is quite, can be quite vast. The difference between them. Okay. The previous technical manager here was exceptionally attuned to the importance and the value and I guess the commercial understanding of the operational department. And because of that, him and Steve and John got along very, very well, and operations and technical really, really blossomed here during their time. Now Steve has returned back to Shell, and we have a new technical manager, and his understanding of or the value that he puts on operations is a little bit less, or maybe his understanding of the, what's the word I'm looking for? The value that we add to the company is, he doesn't perceive it as important as technical. And because of that now, it's not being a problem yet, but it's starting to become a little bit of a lack of mutual respect between the departments, and therefore hindering communication between the two a little, okay? I'm sure it's nothing they can't overcome, but it's not as synergetic as the last two managers and how they work together. And that is, it's a lack of understanding of roles and responsibility, how they can contribute to each other, a lack of mutual respect, understanding their perceived value or their lack of perceived value. Okay, and these are all cultural issues. I know, like I said, they're not national company. From a country point of view, and that, but the discipline itself is a culture, okay? And that lack of mutual respect for those and how they're valued is important. And in this stage of our, at this interview point, they are starting to become a barrier, that lack of mutual respect. So in question 13, what tips do you want to share on effective leadership, communication, and conflict resolution? If you want to see John's full answer, go to 32 minutes and 50 seconds. That's where it starts. I'll let you know right now, we got a little bit off topic on that discussion point. John starts off talking about his technical skills. And as a senior manager now, his technical skills are a very, very small proportion of his job as a leader and a manager. Okay, I would like to think the same for me as well. There are younger guys who are a lot more technically proficient running equipment and stuff like that. And our skills is more, as you become as a leader, is more about how you handle people. Okay. his piece of advice is live and breathe your values. Okay, now I want to tie this to chapter 11, talking about a company having a vision, and also especially about authentic leadership. Okay, leading by example. John Wooden is a basketball coach in the United States. He has a famous quote that says, "The most powerful leadership tool you have is your own personal example." Okay, and this is what I want to talk about when we talk about authentic leadership from chapter 11. And John tells a story. So John's career is worked with Shell. He's bumped around from project to project to project, global project around the world. And part of that is usually a nationalization program where we're trying to teach locals to run and develop the project, and with them share the values of Shell. Okay, and they're all very, very similar. Nicolet's values are safety, passion, integrity, respect, and encouragement. And those values are very, very similar to projects all around the world in the marine industry, and I would say different companies as well. Okay, and John tells a story where when he was younger in his first project, he hears of values, and one of his talking points. And he's like, yeah, I'm here to run stuff, and not these values. Now by the second project, he's heard it again. He's getting a little bit older, more mature, becoming more of a leader. So there's something to these. By the time he's got his third project, his fourth project, he was down in Nigeria, and his wife mentioned, what did she say specifically? She goes, "Yeah, you're becoming a lot more thoughtful and understanding about problems now." And he goes, "Yeah, because at work, these values are starting to pay dividends, treating people with respect, encouraging people, being more understanding, being more open, leading by my own personal example." And his wife actually noticed it at home, okay? So when he came here to Nicolet and he saw these 5 values, he said, "Yep, they will do me fine, right? They're something I can believe in, get behind. They're a core to what I am just as a person, let alone as a leader and a manager here at Nicolet." And that's it, really. Live and breathe your values. You have ethics, you have morals. It might not be your company values, but lead by those, lead by your personal example. And yeah, the world is your oyster after that, really. My last question is question 16, which states, "Is resolving a conflict more important than the outcome to you?" And John said yes. Okay. I wanted to tie this as well into chapter 9. I think it's on page 320, I do believe, about conflict outcomes. Okay. And he gave an example. We had 2 superintendents here who had a disagreement. Okay. But after they voiced their concerns, it kind of blew up a little bit. After that, and they resolved the conflict, the relationship between the 2 gentlemen had become a lot more stronger, a lot more collaborative. They worked together more, and it ties in very, very well with chapter 9 and the conflict outcomes, because it strengthens the relationships after the fact. Okay, John says there's no right or wrong. There's a perspective of how you look at it, your opinion to how the final outcome should be. Okay, and the reason that disagreement is there is because they are passionate about the topic. Okay, and how they should examine it and stuff like that. Once they've come to some middle ground to figure out how they're going to solve the problem, then they move forward. All right, and then because of that, they become more collaborative and more more teamwork and all that good stuff. Okay, he finds that the people that don't have conflict, he perceives that more as no conflict. They just don't care. They're not passionate about a topic enough to defend it or argue their point and stuff of that nature. So I thought it was a nice conclusion for the conflict outcomes and building relationships, and how important conflict is to resolve it and to strengthen those relationships. Alrighty. Good day, gang. This is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I'll be sure to answer any of your questions that you have about it. I would like to have a special thanks for my team members, Sheila, Tanvir, and Adam. Quite frankly, without those 3 people this term, you guys have really pulled me through. I must admit, when you're struggling out there, I'm on the sea all the time, and they really helped and encouraged me along the way, and I really, really appreciate it. For the rest of the class, it was an absolute pleasure working with you. Normally, I take the marine side of these topics for these courses, and this is my first one where I have no mariners in the class. Gotta say, absolutely loved it. All right, and yeah, I'm gonna stay away from the mariners. It's just so refreshing to work with people from a different point of view. It was, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm wishing you and all your family best over the Christmas and the holiday season. Hope lots of family around, tons of food, and you just enjoy yourself. All the best, guys and gals. All right, cheers.